John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. He covers the Eagles. He covers the league nationally, FanRag Sports NFL. He's their NFL columnist, and he joins us now on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN with a look at the Eagles OTAs and the NFL news and notes. I do, John, want to get your quick take on the Sports Business Daily average age television viewers of NFL fans, 50. That raised 4 years from the last time they did it in 2006. And we know a lot of the things there, but if you see the age 50 as the average age of TV viewers and you are coming up on TV contracts, how do you feel about that if you're the NFL?
Well, I would be concerned in theory, but I did see that study, and every sport they did went up drastically, so I'm not sure how much you can take out of that particular study. Other than young people don't like to watch TV, I guess. And I mean, if they're going to continue, it's going to hurt not just the NFL, but everybody. I can't take it seriously, though, because I know there were some that spiked from like 28 to 54, and I don't know how that's possible. I think that's a study not worthy of Scientific America, so I'm not going to jump off the roof from that study.
I will tell you, John, there was one sport that went down significantly. Of course, it was WTA, which is tennis, right? It went down by 8 years. But this is the hilarious part. It went down by 8 years. Now the average age is 55. So it was 63 10 years ago.
Yeah. And I think, it's easier to move down when you have 12 people watching you. And then you average the 8 people watching you. But, yeah, I mean, if you look at just how drastic it was from the last time, it doesn't make any sense on any level. And that's why I kind of have to write that one off.
Well, it makes some sense in the aspect of a lot of young people are watching television differently. They're not watching on cable, and these are cable television numbers, right?
Yeah, and that's part of it, but it doesn't take into account, that would be the generation we're in right now. That would be your 25-year-olds right now. It doesn't make sense for the 35, 40-year-olds who would be on the cusp. And I know too many people in that age range that watch the NFL, enjoy the NFL, and they do it in a traditional way. They're not doing it on their iPads or their phones or things like that. So I've written a lot about the changing landscape and how it's going to affect the next TV contracts. And I think a lot of people in the NFL have their heads stuck in the sand, but I don't think this study is all that big of a deal. I really don't.
Yeah, that's and by the way, the NBA 42 is the average age. NBA very social media savvy. People post their clips. The NFL, if you try to post something of theirs, they're telling you to take it down almost instantaneous. I mean, so younger consumption of the NBA as opposed to the NFL, no fun. They're letting celebrations back in a little bit more. We'll see if that changes the game a little bit.
Yeah, well, there's two schools of thought. There's some providers that think if you just allow people to post stuff on YouTube and things like that, it will bring more viewers. And there's the other side of it, and the NFL has been very hard line about it. People pay a lot of money for the rights to that video, so that's why they come down so hard on it so quickly. I've never seen really any empirical evidence that says giving away stuff for free increases TV ratings. So I don't know if that's a bad strategy. I think from the NFL standpoint, though, their issue is the fact that so many people believe that whatever it is, YouTube, Amazon, Netflix, any kind of streaming option is automatically going to replace the money they're getting from the traditional networks. I'm not sure that is true. And because we have seen no evidence that companies like that are willing to pay what traditional broadcast outlets have been paying. And that's the biggest concern.
John, were you a fan of the game Pitt growing up? Because you have an article on our website right now on 97.3 ESPN. The game Pitt dealt with like commodities, and there were two special cards in the game. There were the bull and the bear, and I just wondered if you had played that as a kid, because you have this article up about the OTAs and which Eagles have been bulls and which have been bears.
No, I'm just well-versed in the stock market. Come on, Pete. But obviously, the bulls tend to be the stocks that are rising, and the bears are the stocks that are falling. So after the OTAs finished up today, I wrote the story on the 5 players I think kind of elevated their stock the most, and the 5 that didn't perform up to what was expected. And, you know, it's interesting. The 10th OTA was supposed to be today, but they canceled it, and they went paintballing. So, as I wrote, take that, Jason Peters. You didn't get to play paintball.
So give us a couple of guys who you thought that had a good showing at these camps to springboard them into the mandatories next week.
These would be the bulls, by the way.
Well, I think the most important one is Jalen Mills, who I think really sees the spot as this team's best cornerback, which that might scare some people, but he's in line for being the most improved player on this team. He just plays with a ton of confidence. He was dominant on Thursday in the red zone, and he's really caught on, and he looks ready to make that a significant leap. And obviously that's very important for a team that's desperate at the cornerback position. One of the other Bears is Rasul Douglas, who started this OTA as the 3rd cornerback and ended it as the starter opposite Jalen Mills. So he's going in the right direction. On the other side of the coin is Patrick Robinson. He's going in the wrong direction. So it's still the biggest concern, that position as a whole, but you can see at least the younger guys are showing confidence in, at least early.
Those are some of the names that are on the Bulls side of things. Who are some of the guys you identified, John, as Bears?
I don't like the guy at the top of your list.
Yeah, that's gonna send some people into a frenzy, but Carson Wentz has not looked good. He's not been sharp throwing the football. We've been there four practices the media has been able to watch, and in 3 of them, he has just not looked good. He has not thrown the football well. I've said from the start, Nick Foles, his backup, has better mechanics. We've talked about Carson's fundamentals a lot, and he's still holding on to the football way too long. There was one play specifically where Torrey Smith was open, and he just held on to the football. He didn't trust what he saw, and you see too much of that. And hopefully it changes. He's still a young player, and he's still got a long way to go, and we have a long way to go before the regular season. But I'd be lying to you if I said he looked good.
Yeah, Carson Wentz at the top of your list. Also, 5th-round pick Shelton Gibson made that list. And, we talked about whether or not the Eagles would try to put him on the practice squad, sneak him through there. Is he in danger of being a guy who doesn't make the team?
Yeah, I mean, right now he wouldn't make the team. He wouldn't be close. So his status as a draft pick would certainly get him a trip to the practice squad, because the way he performed, certainly nobody's going to pick him up on waivers. But he's had a very difficult time picking things up, and you can see it's shaking his confidence. So a number of times in practice, the receivers coach, Mike Groh, has stopped things and sort of corrected his technique. And you can see the fact that he doesn't really has captured on to the route running. It's affected his confidence, and all of a sudden he's dropping the football consistently. So right now it hasn't been good for Gibson.
John, how about Wendell Smallwood? Because I know there were people who had projected him in as being the de facto starter before LeGarrette Blount came around. You have Wendell Smallwood in the Bear category.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and that's what I wrote. He was penciled in as the starter, and that's why I have an eraser, because right now he's the 4th running back on this team. Obviously, LeGarrette Blount, Darren Sproles, and now Donnell Pumphrey, who's in the bull category, is overtaking him. And they've spent a lot of time this spring trying to get the football to Donnell Pumphrey in both the backfield and in the slot as a receiver. They obviously like his skill set, and if he can hold up physically, and that's a big if because he's such a small kid, it seems he's surpassed Wendell Smallwood. So Wendell's going from potential starter to the fourth running back on this team.
Hey, John, I was writing a piece last night on the Eagles secondary, just reading through some of Schwartz's quotes. And yesterday, the first guy that was mentioned by Doug Peterson was Rasul Douglas. And one of the things is, obviously, Jim Schwartz is kind of hoping, I'm assuming, that their secondary's better, that they have a better secondary here. But is Jalen Mills the top guy in that secondary by your estimation?
Oh, yeah, far and away. Far and away, he's their best corner. He's the left corner, which is generally the tougher side. That's where you put your best cornerback. And when they go in the nickel, he goes inside and plays the slot.
I mean, that almost seems egregious to go into a season with him being your best guy. I mean, that's almost –
Well, if you think about what he played at last year, you're probably right, and that's what I wrote. It's probably scary to a lot of people that he's the Eagles' best cornerback. And that might end up being true. In this, obviously it's a very small sample size. The pads are not on. We all know the qualifiers. But in this spring, he's looked great. He really has. And he dominated in red zone play yesterday. He was unbelievable, both in coverage and everything they asked him to do. Now, that's a long way from September against the Dallas Cowboys, New York Giants, whoever, but he has improved drastically. And right now, as I wrote, I think he would be in the running to be the most improved player on this team.
John, is that a spot you could see them looking for a veteran, though, maybe, or somebody on the waiver wire once they get to camp?
Yeah, I mean, I could because they still need depth. And they already did that with Patrick Robinson, but obviously Patrick has not done as well as they had hoped because Rasul Douglas has already passed him, or at least I shouldn't say passed him, but he's mixed in as the starter and now that we've gotten towards the end of OTAs, and we'll see how things shake out in minicamp. But, yeah, I mean, if he continues to not give them what they want, they almost have to look outside the organization because they need help at that position. But it's not going to be to replace Jalen Mills, I can tell you that.
We're talking with John McMullen, our Eagles insider. Hey, John, what about Doug Peterson so far in year number 2? Mike and I were at lunch today, and somebody brought up to us, like, hey, this guy doesn't sound like he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, my dad.
Yeah,
my dad. Last night we had we aired the press conference last night in the best of, and my dad says I'm listening to Doug Peterson last night, and I'm a little concerned. He just doesn't sound like a smart guy.
Well, here's what I say to everyone who says that, because everybody thinks I'm going again. Everybody thinks Chip Kelly's a smart guy. And everybody thinks Doug Peterson is not because he occasionally fumbles at a press conference. I will just say this. One guy has the 300-page playbook. The other guy has the playbook that reads S8. So who's the smart guy at the end of the day? Some people are not as gifted as speaking as Mike Gill and Pete Thompson. I won't throw myself into that glorious category. But some people are just not as gifted speaking extemporaneously, and maybe Doug is that. But that doesn't necessarily mean he doesn't understand football.
I told my dad I tempered him down.
Right, but we both did. We actually both jumped in there and said that we felt that Doug has actually gotten better in his dealings with the media, and he doesn't seem to get caught off guard. Of course, you got to work the Ben Franklin quote in there, boys. That's the one where it's easier to be thought of as a fool than to open one's mouth and remove all doubt.
Hey, John, on the corners, you got Mills, you got Douglas. Looks like he's working first team, right? You got Patrick Robinson. They got to have more than 3 on that roster. Who's next?
That's the problem. Dwayne Gratz has been working in, his former third-round pick in Jacksonville that's flamed out in a couple of different cities. Aaron Grimes is always probably would have made this football team last year if he didn't injure himself on that preseason interception against Pittsburgh. I wrote about him last week, and he's a guy, but his problem is he competes, but he's really so small he can only play in the slot. So they need help as far as depth goes. Even if you, as you're right, even if you go with the top three corners, which is an issue with Mills and Douglas and Robinson, however that shakes out, then you're talking about the C.J. Smiths of the world, the Aaron Grimes, and the Dwayne Gratzes, and that's just not good enough.
No, it's not. Doesn't make me feel warm and fuzzy for the weekend here, pal. Hey, read John's article at 973ESPN.com. The 5 guys who stood out and the 5 guys who struggled at OTAs. 8 OTA sessions, mandatory minicamp start on Monday. Any guys you think that would be in danger of not showing up?
The only one would be Marcus Smith. We'll see how that shakes out, but I expect him to be there. Certainly Jason Peters and Donnie Jones are going to be there, but Marcus is obviously trying to force his way out as quickly as possible because he sees the writing on the wall. He's not going to make this team anyway, so he'd like to get a head start on trying to get a job in another city, and he'll be the one guy to keep an eye on.
All right, Johnny Max is at JF McMullen on Twitter, and don't forget to read his national column at FanRag Sports NFL for all your NFL and Eagles news. Go to 973ESPN.com and click on McMullen's Eagles coverage at the top of the page. All right, pal, we'll talk soon.
Enjoy the weekend, guys.